I'm going to run into a session now with Jonathan Roman, who is the Senior Director, Marketing, Data, and Technology Operations at Chime. And Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us from Las Vegas, I understand.
Oh, yeah. So I'm here for MAU this week. For those of you in the mobile marketing sector, you'll all be familiar with that conference. But yeah, in my fun hotel room here. Fun fact, I was on a call earlier. Somebody thought this was my home. And when I told them I was in a hotel room in Vegas, they were like, I'm glad, because with that wallpaper, I thought you were a murderer or a serial killer. And I was like, yeah. A creepy background, I guess, or wallpaper. So
well, that's good to know, right? It's good to know that it's a little frightening what people actually think about when they see, now that we're inviting them into our rooms and our homes in this way, what they really are thinking about our backgrounds and wallpaper.
Yeah, it was definitely a moment of relief. I am a big fan of gaudy wallpapers, just not this type, not my brand. So
well, fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Jonathan. I'm looking forward to a great conversation today. And I know that we're gonna do a little different format and talk a little bit back and forth, because I know you have a lot of questions and wanted to kind of, look to define things and so forth. So I'm going to actually kind of turn it over to you and kick off some things and start, ask me some questions, and we can kind of walk through it and go from there. And we'll just kind of make this more of a banter back and forth. Talk about all things the metaverse.
This is great. Full disclosure for any of you who've joined to hear what the great things Chime is doing in the metaverse. We're not there yet, so I don't have clear examples of what Chime is doing in the metaverse. Instead, I wanted, maybe next year, instead I wanted to kind of turn this into a 101 kind of preliminary conversation for those of you that are looking to start from the beginning, to learn a nice bit of background about what the metaverse is, to hear, Marty define some definitions, provide a little bit of insight, and, give those recommendations. I have a ton of questions. I am a fan of the metaverse from a user perspective. I'm a big gamer, so I've actively participated in some of the sandbox alphas, a couple of different blockchain related games I've gotten into. So just really excited to get a little bit of a better understanding about the marketing side of things and where that intersection.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and it's been a big question with, we talk to 12 to 15, Fortune 500 brands every week, my team and I, and I would say just in general, the first quarter was so much about education, and I think it still is. It was, what you're starting to see now is that there were some early adopters that wanted to get in quick, and then there's some other folks that were like, hey, what is this? I know everybody's talking about it. How do we define it? What do we want to do? And we're now starting to see the execution of some of those strategies from that learning between Q1 and now Q2. And I think that's something from my perspective that's been pretty exciting to see. So
yeah, that's great. And I've been part of a lot of great conversations recently where brands have been talking about brands I wouldn't have even expected to get involved into the metaverse, because I think a lot of times, at least what I thought initially was oh, you need to have some sort of parallel to maybe the gaming sector, or be some sort of social platform to really have success in the metaverse. But hearing so many great stories about brands that health brands, fitness brands, that found their niche in a way to make that successful and created their own space. So yeah, would love to talk more about that. But just to kick things off, I think let's start with defining the metaverse, right? We have a lot of I feel like it's an evolving kind of definition. I'm surprised to hear, what I thought was predominantly Web3 based companies that are being built out were only the metaverse, but then we have this notion of centralized or Web2 metaverses. So would love to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is a slide, thank you for sharing, that we talk about a lot when we're, during our initial conversations with brands that maybe, are a little, little nervous about what it is, and they've heard this term, the metaverse, and it's so, liberally used that I think it's something that really needs definition. And I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but we really view the metaverse as two different distinct categories, and that is the centralized, as you mentioned, the decentralized. The centralized is Web 2 metaverse, and these are the companies that everybody's heard of. They have the scale and the reach, the Robloxes, the Fortnites, the Minecrafts, the Metas. They have huge audiences. They're not a low barrier to entry, I might add. I mean, you're talking a mid, a low seven-figure investment. You can definitely do it for under that, but I mean, I think some of the things that you're seeing right now have been really exciting. But it is controlled by corporations, right? There's when we say centralized, it's It is someone's making the decision, how much the creators are getting, what the rules are. It's really the business model. I think that where from a marketer perspective, I have a friend who runs a big design company and build company, doing a lot in Roblox. And it's been fascinating to learn that certain brands that you wouldn't think have an audience there, are going in there and they're actually making a nice return on their investment. Now, not all of them, and I'd say they're more the exception than the rule, but the ones that have been able to figure it out have been making some significant, income from these. So there, I think that there are definitely, opportunities to play within the space, but I think, one of the things we always talk about is authenticity. So if it's authentic to your brand and it resonates with the audience and the community, and it's authentic to the community and they're enjoying it and leveraging it, then I think you've hit the nail on the head. But it's really, the creators are relying on those platforms. Within the decentralized Web3, it opens up a whole new, number of opportunities from ownership. These are real economies. I think, it's built on the blockchain. There are, NFTs, which, is again, another loosely, used term, is pretty much anything and everything within a, blockchain, decentralized experience, whether it's land or building or wearables or what you think of as an NFT, but it really gives it that functionality that really is a big difference, because what you can and can't use within the decentralized metaverse to open up and unlock so many different opportunities is really a big key about the decentralized metaverse. But on top of it, and then you see, I think I mentioned these brands, Decentraland, Sandbox, you talked about being in season 1, and Sumnum Space is another one. They all offer different experiences, but at the end of the day, they're community based. They're all built on blockchain. There's digital land that you can purchase, that you can own, and just like it, in the real world, you purchase it and it can go up, but it can also go down, as we've seen recently. And I think that that's something to keep in mind. As you see a lot of brands jump in, and we were talking to a brand that was considering buying land in the metaverse a couple months ago. And I'm not a big believer right now. I think if you're thinking of it from a long-term investment, that's different, and some brands are, but I know that it's a little different dealing in cryptocurrency. We deal all in, we remove that friction by dealing all in dollars and insertion orders. So I think that it's, there are ways around it, but it creates a tremendous amount of opportunities with it being decentralized than, the centralized aspect of it. But, an example is if you're building something in Decentraland, it has to get voted on by the community. Even your wearables has to be voted on by a committee in terms of whether or not it's, acceptable and so forth. So I think that's the biggest sort of difference between is the blockchain development and the utility value of what goes on within that, and the fact that it's not controlled by one corporation, but it's more community related. And it's really the those creators that are the primary beneficiary of that growth. So
yeah, that's really interesting. And I've been following a couple of kind of NFT developers that are doing a similar thing in terms of the rights of those creative properties. It's almost like if you own a piece of that NFT or an NFT in that kind of larger scale of NFT category or brand, you're almost like a board member, right? Like everybody,
right.
How the intellectual property is going to be leveraged, if people can make like an animated series using characters from these NFTs. It's really interesting that Decentraland is going that route. Now, Sandbox isn't quite the same there, right? I think Sandbox is more, you get in, you buy your land. I think they have like kind of an auction-based or direct sales system there. And then once you have ownership of the land, is it correct to say like you can do kind of whatever you want as long as it's falling into like general guidlines that are provided by the brand?
Yeah, more so, I think. And and you've also seen a lot of celebrities going in there. A lot of those have been uniquely structured deals, is what I'll say. But there does, it does allow for a lot more, but a lot more engagement to a certain extent, but not more engagement, but a different kind of engagement. But it's all gamified, right? It looks like Minecraft to a certain extent. So if your brand is comfortable, right, in that environment, then that creates, that's okay, but you have to be comfortable and you have to give up a little freedom as a brand to go into these environments of what your products and brands will look like within this environment. So that creates a different issue. But so it's exciting.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had the opportunity to participate in one of the sandbox open alphas, and it was cool just being there wasn't a whole lot of content at that point, but it was almost like getting ported into a town square, and like whatever direction you look, there's a different brand experience. It has its own look, its own feel. You can enter into it. And then the integration with the NFTs was really cool to walk into like a house over there, see everybody's
Right.
artwork. You could buy their artwork. So it's kind of interesting when we think about the, the overall metaverse and like how certain brands are embracing digital goods, but then translating that into real life goods as well.
Right.
I think there's going to be a lot of success there because folk won't feel like, oh, I'm only purchasing this digital thing that is only valuable maybe in this specific space. They'll have something physical and tangible to also, kind of go along with that.
Yeah, we call that digital twinning. It's called twinning. So you can actually buy the product in the metaverse, as an NFT that you can wear on your avatar, but then you can actually get that product shipped to you. So you can actually have a real life version, whether it's a jacket, a shirt, or shoes that are created. So there's, it's the technology, and I think I've touched on it before, is that, it's changing literally every day. And I think that that's one of the really exciting things about it is that, there is some gray here, but I was around in Web 1, and I think that the biggest difference is that, the internet was just being created then, truly, in terms of how we do things. And so I think it definitely, took a little while, not too long, but a couple of years to really take off. I think with the metaverse, we're just going to see it scale so quickly because the technology, the ad technology, blockchain development, it's just so much further along those lines. So, anyway, so you want to move on a little to, did I answer all those questions?
Yeah, I think that's great. I guess finally, like if we're going through the words to know, right? What is a simple way to explain to users that may not be familiar with the concept of Web3 in general versus Web2? Something easy that, will help foundationally get people to understand what the difference is. And, we're not really scaled out or really, I guess you could say mature from a Web3 perspective, right? So,
not at all. I'm sorry, were you going to finish that? Was there another
No,
question?
that's it. Just like Web2 versus Web3, like what are your thoughts there? And just in terms of the differentiation between, what we're dealing with right now, we're living and breathing Web2 versus what we hope to be Web3 someday.
Yeah, no. Well, it's, I'll tell you, it is, the thing that I always talk about, right, is as a marketer to grasp is that you're no longer advertising at consumers anymore, right? You're inviting them in to experience your brand. And I think that to me is the biggest difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is that now I've got to really take a different perspective and I've got to really make that connection with the consumer in this new way that kind of tells my narrative and tells my story differently than if I'm just, whether it's a, performance related campaign or, it just gives you so many different opportunities for storytelling than you would within, the Web 2 experience as it exists today, or just traditional media perspective. And so I think that's the biggest difference between how marketers should think about Web 3 in particular. You can still get away with that with Web 2 a little bit, but it's still very gamified, right? It's not as realistic and as authentic as you may want, whereas Web 2 is still very gamey. Right. Web 3 is gamey. I won't say it's not, but I think it's also moving towards that direction of more realistic. Some of the new platforms I've been seeing coming out, like TGC World, is a very realistic graphical experience from a consumer standpoint. And I think that you're going to start to see more of those, and you see platforms with islands and more real estate that look like mansions in the space. So I think there's just so much coming down within a Web 3 experience right now that it's just kind of a new world out there. It's a true economy as opposed to the gamified version of what we really think is Web 2 and gaming from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the land plot buying component is really interesting to me as well. Just like seeing how much more expensive that has gotten over time versus when I looked at it, even like a year ago, and then I'm also contemplating maybe I'll buy a plot of land in the metaverse because it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do that in real life. And we'll just make sure, it's not decorated with this wallpaper.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the great news. You can change it as often as you want. You don't have to call a contractor to get it done. Or you'd have to get a builder, which are just as equally as hard to find now as contractors. But But yeah, that's really an interesting, concept. I mean, I think now on a personal level, I mean, I think that there's great buying opportunities out there. But it's still risky, right? It still is, and it's not inexpensive. I mean, yes, it's less expensive now, but it is still, the real dollars. I mean, it's even though it's cryptocurrency, you still have to convert real dollars into cryptocurrency and then, go in and buy it. It's not so straightforward. You definitely need an education to be able to go out and do it. And I think that's one of the other things that I think is really different with Web3 and Web2 is that there's a higher learning curve for consumers. And I think it's really important for brands to remember that is that even though it's web-based, it's not as easy, for a consumer to actually execute transactions and participate. So Decentraland and Sandbox, for example, Sandbox you actually have to download. Decentraland is all web browser-based, which is great, and you can join as a guest. However, you really don't get the same experience unless your wallet is connected. So therefore, without that wallet, you're not getting if you and I were in Decentraland and you had your wallet connected and I didn't, I was just joining as a guest, you would have a different experience than I would. You wouldn't be able to interact with the brand experiences as much or the overall experience within Decentraland. And I think that once there starts to get more mass adoption with cryptocurrency, and wallets being connected within the metaverse in Web3 in general, I think that you're going to start to see a much greater adoption by consumers and then brands. But I do want to recommend that if you do something from a brand perspective within the metaverse as a Web3 perspective, that you take the time to make sure that you educate your consumers about what it is and what they have to do to really fully engage with your experiences there, not just cater to the audience that's there, but to bring in new consumers. And then once they're there, help direct them on what they should be doing. Don't just assume that everybody's going to know to go up the stairs because there's stairs there. But why would I want to go up the stairs? What's up there? What am I going to see? How should I do this? And even just some pre-marketing materials about even using social media, to get the best experience, connect your wallet. What does that mean? And, showing consumers what they need to do to enter this. And I think once we start getting that adoption and brands starting to drive that adoption, or whether it's entertainment of any kind, I think you're going to start to see it really take off. So that's kind of my biggest, different differentiator between Web3 metaverse and Web2 is I think, people are really kind of familiar and it's kind of, it's continued to peak in Web2 from an audience perspective, but the next iteration is really that is Web3, and it's going to change so much. Right now, we're seeing we're at the as I say that the first half inning of the metaverse, because I think it's going to blow everybody's mind in 6 months and a year from now what we're going to be able to do from the underlying blockchain technology than what we can do in Web2, and I think that's the biggest game changer.
Yeah, completely agree there, and I think for anybody watching right now, go out, download MetaMask, try out having a digital wallet, just acclimate yourself. It can be a little confusing the first time, even when I did it. I'm a gamer, I'm a little bit more tech savvy. Definitely took me a little while to figure it out and get acclimated with it. But then once you do, it's really not that bad. And that technology,
it's seamless at that point.
It will continue to get easier and easier too. I feel like with anything that's brand new, right? We're going to find out ways to make that barrier of entry, less. You won't have to be a technical expert as you had to be a little while ago, and now it's much more manageable. And
no, absolutely. And there's technologies that are coming out that make it much easier for you and kind of do it in dollars and the conversion. So it's getting there. And once I think we start, that tipping point will be when it really of mass adoption, when it just really becomes so easy to do that it's not as confusing. But honestly, even from my perspective, it's still a little confusing depending on what what you're trying to do. And they're connecting wallets up and being able to buy things is just it's not so straightforward as you would think.
Yeah. So great. I think brands that are a little nervous about entering into the decentralized areas, you do have a lot of those well-established centralized metaverses like Roblox, like Fortnite. So maybe that's a good way to start out. And then as you're kind of thinking about decentralized metaverses in the future. So great. Wanted to ask a little bit more questions, as somebody on the brand side or somebody within a marketing sector, what are some of the questions as somebody working in those spaces that they should be asking before deciding to test out a brand experience within the metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, as I think I stated a little earlier, first and foremost, make sure that you've planned enough time. I think marketers in general between them and their agencies, or marketers in general, assume that things will, that the time window can just be made shorter. Within the metaverse, it really isn't. You are literally building and constructing, and no different if you're redoing your bathroom. You can't put your nice toilet and your shower and tile up until the wiring is in and the framing is up and the plumbing is in, and that takes time. It doesn't just happen overnight, as much as you want to see the end result. I think that's one thing to take in consideration, and think about what you're going to be building and really what's the purpose of the build, right? What is the experience I want the consumer to have, but have a longer term vision. And this all ties together, because the shorter window you give yourself of building, the more and more you're going to have to compromise what you are able to build because of the time, if you're up against a specific deadline of actually getting to launch. And so if you don't take those into consideration, they start to add up, and suddenly now, where you came with this big idea of all these things that you wanted to do, you really have to scale it back, because it A, may cost more than you anticipated, or B, it takes too long and you're working up against a deadline and you can't have both. And so I think that that's really important to consider. And then the other thing that really is important is when you're building out an experience, think of it as an experiential marketing type of event. You're producing an event. It just happens to be digital, and it happens to be in the metaverse. And when you have people coming to an event, you've got to keep giving them a reason to come back. You can't just build something and they will come. They might, but if they come and you don't give them a reason to come back, then they're not going to come back, right? Once I've already been through a quest and I've received my NFT or recruit, whatever reward it was, I'm done. Why do I need to come back if there's nothing different? I think you've seen I think Samsung's done a great job of kind of doing this in iterative processes. Come back soon, we're going to make some changes. You can reskin things, you can add new quests, you can build on top of what you've already done and turn that into the experience, right? So now you're building multiple experiences and bolt-ons to what you've already got. So now you've got a deeper experience, so that when new consumers come in, they can stay longer within an environment. So I think you really have to be deliberate about what you're doing and thinking about it, but it still gets back to testing and learning, right? Don't go in expecting that everything's going to be perfect and you're going to be able to measure everything exactly how you want it, but more so, what do we want to do? Taking a long-term vision to it and phase it, right? Phase 1, we're going to do this. Phase 2, we're going to do that. And then beyond that, what is the long-term vision that you want for the space? We talked a little bit, I think, about buying land versus renting land. And, I said, I'm a big proponent right now of brands to rent land, because you don't know if Decentraland or Sandbox are going to be the biggest thing in a year from now, right? They could be, there's multiple platforms being built right now that you don't even know about. They could come out and could be exactly what you want. And if you've bought land somewhere, you're really kind of stuck, for right now. And so I think, it's a good idea to maybe take, if you do want to do that, to really have a central focal point and sort of a headquarters in the metaverse, but then be able to also test out in all these other metaverse platforms that are being launched and see what engages those consumers. It may be better for your brand. And so don't think that everything right now is the end all be all and you have to jump in right now. I think it's a good idea and opportunity to test and learn, so that when these new platforms come up, and as you figure out what works and doesn't work, you'll be that much smarter when it is really scaling. And it's going to be really hard and expensive. It's going to be an expensive lesson the longer you wait, because the longer you wait, it's going to just cost more money to do those builds and experiences. And then how do you really, how do you build off of anything if it's your first time in, and you can make mistakes that you don't want? And that's one of the things when we really help guide brands in. It's not just about, you can go out and you can go to Decentraland, you can go to one of their builders and they'll build you. They'll show you what they've built, and they'll say, what do you want to build? And you tell them and they'll build it for you. But they're not going to provide the strategy, the long-term thinking, the understanding of what your product is and your service. They'll build you what you want. And so that's one of the things that we really try and focus on, is really providing a full service experience in terms of what you should be building, where you should be building, why there's benefits of each, and then what you should be doing to bring people in from an experience, and then continuing to do it. So it's I think there's lots of different ways, but I think that from my perspective, that's kind of in talking to different brands and what they're doing is all the time is exciting. And I think you even mentioned this too, is that some of the first brands that we've had, as clients and coming out are not who I would have originally gone after. And I love the fact that there's, CPG brands and food brands and all these brands that I would have never even thought of from my, putting my sales hat on, like, that's the first brand we should go after. So it's just so exciting to see these brands taking risks to a certain extent with their brand and really getting into and leaning into the metaverse and Web3.
It's great. I'm really excited to see how like these sort of strategies evolve, and if different teams internally one day are dedicated to content in the metaverse, and other teams, wearing wearable goods and all that, and other teams are dedicated to creating those experiences. Maybe these will be teams in-house one day that kind of operate similar to, what we do at social. And then I think that's a great thing. Like, think of any emerging social platform, how it's relatively cheap, from the get-go when it's brand new, but then once you have all the brands jumping on board, you have CPM skyrocket, and just like
exactly. And you have the audience, and so the scales there, and it gets expensive really fast, and that's actually a really good, analogy, is that your social media and content, think of it as that kind of a strategy. It's like, you're not going to produce one piece of content every month. It's you've got to stay true to what's happening in the real world. You've got to be, on top of things, and you've got to have a strategy and figure all that out ahead of time and plan it out. And that's very similar to what you need to do in the metaverse as well.
It's great. I'm a big Japanese animation nerd, and there's a movie called Summer Wars that's actually really interesting. There's two. There's one called Summer Wars and another one that more recently came out called Belle. But both interpretations of the metaverse in those two movies are that like somebody emerges as like the winner, and essentially, let's say like a Facebook, even though I don't know if they're going to win this one, but we'll see. There's like one predominant metaverse, and everything is integrated into that. Your bank accounts, your experiences, like different brands, like it's all in a centralized place, and your digital avatar kind of exists in the metaverse the same way you would exist in real life. And you go to these, and it's all fully integrated. I think from a technical perspective, that is probably going to be very difficult to do in terms of creating that, but we'll see one day. It's just a very interesting interpretation there.
I think that's the goal, Jonathan. I think that's the goal, right? If anybody's seen Ready Player One, everybody's like, when's it going to be that? Well, I mean, it's going to take a while before we get there. I mean, you can already kind of do interoperability, like Decentraland is web-based, as is some numbspace. So you can actually jump out into a Web 2 experience, and you can drive in. All you need is the coordinates. So you can do that to some extent. There's just not enough metaverse, platforms right now to really jump into. And I think, this centralized versus decentralized is going to be more of a challenge than just the decentralized. And it'll get there. Yeah. It's just when, and, it's such an exciting ride right now. So everybody hang on, because like I said, 6 to 12 to 24 months, it's going to be just vastly different than it is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the ways you've seen brands like really just take advantage of their experiences in the metaverse? Do you have any like really great examples that you could share?
The best example that we as a company, as an organization, that we've seen was actually in Decentraland Fashion Week. And I can't remember what the brand, I'm not going to say the brand because I'm not sure what it was, but I can describe it to you. It was a nightshade. Okay. It was a cream you put on at night that would, make your skin softer and, better and improved. And how do you communicate that in the metaverse, right? How do you communicate that value prop in the metaverse? And we really loved, and I really love the fact that they didn't do some great build, right? They didn't do something crazy or host a big concert or something to talk about their brand and get people there. They actually just had, I believe it was their logo floating above a space, nothing big built on it. There's a hole you jumped into and dropped down. And there was all this ethereal music and, light music, and made you feel really kind of, in a mellow place. And they had some videos that, talking about the brand a little bit. But then if you had your wallet connected and you were able to, I believe it was a POAP, which is a proof of audience attendance, is what's used in Metaverse 3 to show that you were actually there, and you can receive something like either, through your wallet. And when you did that and you walked out of the experience, you actually had like a glowing aura around your avatar to show that you had, as a wearable, that you were now glowing because you went through this nightshade experience. And it didn't talk about their brand. It didn't talk about, the value, maybe a little bit about it, but it was the experience. And then there was something that the consumer received as a result of it that was unique. the only place you could get it was by going through this experience. And I think that's the utility value. And then those, those wearables, I think, are really, the utility values that I think brands really underestimate the value of the utility value of an NFT, as a wearable or as an NFT to access unique, meet and greets or access different parts of your build. And leveraging it, and then as a longer term, almost like it's the next iteration of the loyalty program, because now you have that two-way communication, even though it's anonymized, fully anonymized with the consumer. You do know something about them from their wallet, and you are able to go in there and now drop something if they come to another experience, or invite them to another experience, and even off-world in real-world experiences. So it's not just such a linear, it's just only in the metaverse, but you can actually throw an event in the real world that's tied into the metaverse, and I can actually float back and forth between the two by using an NFT or a wearable that I've been able to purchase within that. And so I think that you really need to kind of take, there's going to be a paradigm shift of what this really is and how this is interconnected. It's not just through the metaverse, but it's also the real world and the metaverse. And how do you as a marketer connect that into these tangible, real world experiences? And I think that's one of the really exciting things that I see is really this ecosystem that's going to expand as a result of it.
It's great. And I think it's important for marketers to know as well, like, how are you engaging users, not only in your metaverse experience, but outside on some of your other channels. So thinking about integrated marketing and how you're working with social, how you're working with influencers to kind of like, get the word out there, the experience they have in the metaverse, going back to promoting the brand. So, just it's not just in that space. It can be incorporated into a number of different marketing channels as well. Cool. So I think we're coming up.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marty.
We've got about 9 minutes left. No. I was gonna say, I think we've got a little bit of time yet still.
Cool. So what do you see as being the future of the metaverse? So we've talked about, a lot about what it is today. I know for me, I think one of the significant barriers of entry into more in-depth experiences, as always, is usually technology, right? We're waiting for AR and VR technology to really catch up and become more integrated and convenient into our day-to-day. I think right now, as an Oculus 2 owner, as much as VR is very cool and doing things like VR chat and VR gaming, you still have to put on this hefty headset, doesn't quite fit over the glasses very well. Battery life isn't great. So what are your thoughts about the future of the metaverse and like what that eventually, or you hope it will eventually become?
Yeah, I think Charles is going to talk a little bit about that right after us. And I'd be interested to hear what he has to say in terms of it. He's been in the space a really long time and has a great perspective. But I really see it as, this new channel that is going to incorporate a number of different online and offline experiences for consumers and brands that doesn't exist today. And I think that, for me, it's that underlying foundational technology that blockchain brings to the table and smart contracts bring that is going to change so much of our life that we can't even envision it right now. I know a lot of people are thinking about it, but I think it's just as as much as the internet changed our world, I think the metaverse is going to change our world in an equally impactful way, but in a very different way. And I think it's about that interconnectivity between offline and online, and it's going to be more seamless. And I'm really interested to see where it goes. I mean, there's AR, there's VR, there's just traditional web-based browsers and the reality of it, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think everybody thinks that it's all going to be, with an Oculus or, some sort of a headset on, but I don't believe that. I mean, I think there's just going to be so many ways that it's going to affect consumers and brands' lives from a technology standpoint and utility value standpoint that they're, going to be really surprised at how it has changed their lives. And then on the VR perspective, I mean, I think that is one area that's going to take off. It's not going to be for everybody. By any stretch of the imagination. I know I personally do get, motion sick having a headset on or, watching my kids play a game and they're in the first person shooter mode. And I'm like, I'm nauseous. I can't watch them play. And even, on a personal level, when I'm in those modes, I get motion sick, and that's just not a fun experience. And I think a lot of people are like that. So I think it's going to be a while before, VR really takes off and gets mass adoption, but it'll always have a strong audience. So that's kind of my thought on it. So
Very cool. Yeah, it's
But
great that we now are
I'm just one
branching off.
guy out here, selling
Oh,
the metaverse.
yeah, it's great that we have all these different kind of.
I have a little delay.
Oh, a little delay on my side. Might be the hotel internet. Are you hearing me now? Okay. Yeah, it's a little choppy on my end too, but we'll power through it. I guess in terms of metrics, so this is another big things that brands are asking. They have their, they have their strategy. They're figuring out how they can create a brand experience within the metaverse. What are the KPIs? How are they measuring for success? I know we had some speakers earlier that kind of talked a little bit about that, but what are ways that brands are saying this was a successful test or this was an unsuccessful test? And what do you think the perception should be, maybe even if the numbers aren't showing, crazy lift or engagement or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the $1 million question. KPIs, I think KPIs and targeting also, I think, is the big question right now in the metaverse in terms of how do I target, because everything's anonymized and so forth. But, from a KPI and success standpoint, I think you have to really temper what the expectation is and manage up right now, right? You have to really set realistic expectations, knowing that you may be way off base, both positively and negatively. And that's why I think testing and learning is so important, Jonathan, because right now we don't know what those answers are. We don't know what's good. And until you actually get in there, and I think you talked about this, which is right, get in there and play. You can't do it unless you dip your toes in the water, see what you can do and how it applies to your business, and figure out if it worked or not. And that's really the stage that we're at right now, is that there's just no definition of it. And how many times in our careers as marketers and folks that are within the space, bringing brands into this, do we have to really kind of have an impact on what happens within the space? And it's a really unique time within all of our careers right now to be able to jump in and say, I was a part of this. And I was able, this happened as a result of, my efforts in this campaign that I did. Now it's, now that's more of a more common phrase. I have actually a friend, this is going way back, who basically created the name Rich Media because they were selling this technology to a client, and they were paying them a lot of money, and the client wanted to call it something, and they were like, no, this is our product, and that's not what we want to call it. And had to come back and go like, well, they're paying us a lot of money, and this is what they want to call it. So suddenly that's what it became. And that's what Rich Media is today. And so I think that, not that it's all about the almighty dollar, but I think that, being able to say that you did that and, at this juncture, and be able to participate in it, and, in 20 years, look back and go, hey, I was around when, the metaverse was just starting, and look where it is now. And it's no different than the internet, right? And to see how far and the journey is, and what's changed and how it's impacted your life, I think is really an exciting time. So I think it's, as brand marketers, it's an exciting time to be able to get in there and to test and learn. I think you really, I think you said it well, you just got to get in there. You've got, on a personal level too. I think that's one of the things also that we see from a brand marketer standpoint is the education, is we're doing actual walkthroughs within like a Decentraland. And it's, even though marketers are talking about, they aren't actually dipping their toe in and actually physically going in to see what it's like. Yep. And I think that's really what they have to do, is really get in there, even if it's a bad experience, even if it takes them a little time and they don't understand it, get in and see what it's like, because that's what your consumers are going to be experiencing. And what would you do differently as a brand marketer? And that's how we've kind of taken this approach also, is like, we as consumers have gone in and see different, activations, and we're like, well, why do I want to do that? Or how do I get out of here? Or why do I want to go into that room? And we're like, well, we need to be more thoughtful when we're guiding our brand partners, like, make sure you're doing this. And that's, I think it's about being that thoughtfulness that you can only get as being a consumer in the experience.
Yeah, that's great. This has been such informative conversation. So thank you so much for doing a little bit of reversal of roles here. And
I love it. I love it.
I did want to kind of ask about if people could stop calling me during this very moment. I did want to ask about, like, if brands or marketers in general, wanted to learn a little bit more and kind of interact and see a little bit more about how Admix can help them get involved in this experience. Did you want to talk a little bit about, like, how do we engage with Admix? How do you reach out? What services do you provide as an organization to help, brands?
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I never get that question asked, so I appreciate it. I'm usually always having to do it. And this has actually been a lot of fun, because it's great because, we do have a lot of that experience. So it's nice to be able to share that in this environment. But yeah, listen, you can reach out to me, Marty, at admixplay.com. You can go to our website right now, but we're in the process of rebranding, so it's not very Web3 focused, and Admix is not really screaming Web3. So I just want to put that caveat out there, because we did actually have that come out on a client call the other day. Like, we went to your website, but I think once they find us talking to them about no summer than what we just did right now, Jonathan, you see that we're thoughtful, that we're authentic about what it is that we do. We're going to say and suggest what you should and shouldn't do. It's obviously up to the brand, but we're here to help guide that process and make sure that you don't make mistakes. But there are going to be mistakes that are made. And I think, what we really offer is a very simple process. It's all dollar-based. It's all insertion order or agreement-based. So we take that friction out of it. And we have a very simple value prop. We own land, so we can either lease it to you, lease to own, buy it outright for you, help that and figure out what environment is the right environment. Then it's about building. We have one of the biggest building teams in the space right now. And so it's about understanding that dynamics, how and what you should and shouldn't do, and how long it's going to take realistically to get things done. And then it's about that activation and extension. So it's a full stack offering, so that you're not really left up to creating the strategy on your own and having to go and learn, but working as a partner. We really want to be seen as a partner, not a vendor, because you've really got to get in. And I can tell you what we're about to launch tomorrow it takes a village, right? It's not just a, hey, this is what you should do or what you can do. And it's about learning and figuring it out together and as you go through that process. But thanks so much for asking, Jonathan. I appreciate that.
No problem. And I think you should move away from dollars and into Marty coins. So
Marty tokens. There we go.
Marty tokens. Hopefully we don't
change
like a Binance coin for something else to get the Marty tokens. Hopefully it's available on all major exchanges.
I'm in. Thank you, Jonathan.
No
Enjoy
problem.
the rest of MAU.